What's up, folks? This is Tony Brewer. You're listening to or watching, as the case may be, Cogitations. Cogitations is the podcast where we think about things, we contemplate them, we turn them over in our minds, and then we discuss them. Daniel chapter 7, verse 28, Daniel writes, "Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me. My countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart." We're not going to keep the matter in our heart. We're going to talk about it. Let's see. Today we're talking about a pretty heavy topic. I've got some notes prepared for this. I'm going to go through this about as straightforward as I can. There's not going to be many embellishments, and I'm not going to chase too many rabbits. But the title for the show is "Modern Immigration and the Echoes of Slavery: A Christian Appeal to Conscience and Compassion." I do believe, from everything I'm seeing online, everything I'm seeing from my brethren, I think we're greatly misunderstanding and perverting justice. This modern immigration situation is pretty rough. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. As our audience is building, remember, we are streaming on Rumble. You can follow us on Rumble. Just go to rumble.com and search up Christianity Now Streams. And that's all I want to say about that. We can also, hello, Terry Crooks. Good morning. And we can also look at some of the stuff that we have. Well, where am I going here? I've lost the plot. Where are my? It's just been too long since I've done this. Let's try to walk this down. Join the Christianity Now Facebook group. Joining the Christianity Now Facebook group gets you part of a group that's growing. There's a bunch of activity on there. There is an eclectic mix of people professing Christendom on the Christianity Now Facebook group. So consider being a part of that. For show topics and questions, send an email, christianityisnow@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, here's a tip jar, nearchurches@gmail.com. And you can also consider subscribing on Substack. Go to Substack and search Christianity Now, and you can become a supporter there at $5 a month, or just a free subscriber, and you can have access to all of our articles. The show today is basically an article. I'm going to go through the article. If you have questions, comments, observations, put them in the comment section as we're going through the article, and we'll see how that works. While this icon is up on the screen, I won't be able to see your comments. So let's get right into this. Echoes of Slavery, the Modern Immigration. It's a Christian appeal to conscience and compassion. And this article draws a critical comparison between the economic structure of antebellum slavery and the current treatment of undocumented immigrants within modern immigration systems in the United States and Canada. While acknowledging the historical and moral gravity of chattel slavery, the piece highlights functional parallels in how both systems exploit human behavior through legal exclusion, economic dependency, and systemic vulnerability. Grounded in biblical moral law and supported by economic history, including the work of Robert Fogel and Stanley Ingerman, this analysis exposes how policies presented as compassion often conceal mechanisms of control and abuse. This article that we're looking at today argues that Christians, guided by Scripture, must confront these injustices not as political partisans, but as moral agents accountable to God's universal standard of justice and mercy. So let's introduce this thing, a hard conversation worth having. Well, there are some comparisons that feel too raw, too charged, too heavy to make. But sometimes the weight of history demands a hard look. Not for the sake of sensationalism, but for the sake of justice, clarity, and compassion. As a conservative, as a Christian, as someone who believes deeply in the moral law of God, I care about truth. I care about people. And I care about the way systems, governments, and economies abuse and use human beings that are made in the image of God. This is not an attempt to downplay the horrors of antebellum slavery, nor to flippantly use its memory for political gain. It's an attempt to soberly observe the growing pattern in the United States and Canada, where modern immigration policies and economic practices have resulted in the creation of a disposable labor class, vulnerable, voiceless, and often invisible. The more you look at the mechanics, how labor is sourced, how people are kept docile and dependent, how systems extracts value while providing only the bare minimum for survival, the harder it is to ignore the uncomfortable parallels between the slave economy of the 17th through the 19th centuries. The liberal establishment promotes policies that appear compassionate on the surface: open borders, non-enforcement of immigration laws, sanctuaries for undocumented workers. But the reality behind the curtain is brutal. It's a system that allows people to be exploited for cheap labor, housed in substandard conditions, stripped of upward mobility, and discarded when they're no longer useful. The left sells this arrangement as moral. Big business reaps the profits, and the people caught in the middle live lives of quiet suffering. This article is not written in anger. It's written in love. Love for the immigrant who deserves better. Love for the citizen whose wages and livelihood are undercut. Love for the truth that must be spoken if anything is ever going to change. And above all, love for the universal moral order that God set in motion, a law that holds every man and every nation accountable to the same standard regardless of their flag or party. We're going to walk through history, economics, politics, and scripture. The goal is not to shame, but to persuade. The comparison may be uncomfortable, but the purpose is compassion. If we can see the truth clearly, perhaps we can build something better, something that honors justice and mercy. The economic reality of slavery in the antebellum South. To understand the comparison that we're making, we must first be honest about what slavery was. Not just in its moral abomination, but in its economic structure. The slave system in the American South was not really about dominance. It was about profit. Slaves were treated as capital assets, and their value was measured in productivity and maintenance cost. A plantation owner would purchase a slave at a significant upfront cost. From that point forward, the economic goal was simple: extract as much labor as possible while investing the least amount necessary to sustain life and function. Slaves were given the basics: food, shelter, minimal medical care, and clothing. The goal was never human flourishing. The goal was utility, always utility. Robert Fogel and Stanley Ingerman, in their controversial but data-driven work, Time on the Cross, showed that slave owners operated under a cold calculus. How little can be spent to keep a worker alive and laboring? What level of medical care preserves productivity without wasting money? How many calories are needed to maintain field strength? The questions are grotesque, but they were real. Now, it's true that not every slave owner was sadistic. In fact, most of them were not. Many were what society might have called good masters, as it were, in the same way one might treat a valuable ox or a prized horse well. But treating someone well by feeding them and preventing infection does not make the system moral. It reinforces the point: slaves were livestock in the eyes of the law and the logic of the economy. Nothing more. They're just livestock. The average slave in 1850 might cost $400 to $800. That's the equivalent of $15,000 to $25,000 today. But the yearly cost to maintain a slave was far less than hiring a free man for a wage. That was the key incentive. Enslaved people were not paid, they were kept, and being kept, and in being kept, their humanity was denied. Against this backdrop, moral voices rose in protest. Men like William Wilberforce and Frederick Douglass did not appeal to economics but to conscience, demanding that society free slaves and see the slaves as men, not machines. Their arguments remind us that moral clarity begins when we measure systems not only by what they produce, but by how they treat the people inside of them. The hidden machinery of modern immigration in the United States and Canada, this is where the rubber hits the road, folks. Modern immigration in the United States and Canada has become a labyrinth of half-truths, economic pressures, and political maneuvering. It is rarely addressed with honesty because too many powerful interests depend on keeping the system exactly as it is. The rhetoric from the left is saturated with appeals to compassion. Let them in. No human is illegal. We are a nation of immigrants. These sound virtuous on the surface, but beneath the slogans lies a difficult and a different reality. Undocumented immigrants, particularly those from impoverished nations, often become trapped in an economic system that strips them of protection, power, and dignity. They work long hours in agriculture, construction, janitorial services, and food processing. They are often paid in cash under the table without benefits or legal recourse. Their wages fall below what any citizen would accept because their legal status makes them vulnerable. Employers can intimidate them with threats of deportation. Landlords can exploit them. Bureaucracy can ignore them. Many of these workers live in employer-owned housing, sometimes trailers, sometimes run-down bunkhouses, sometimes apartments packed with multiple families. Their shelter is tied to their labor is tied to their silence, and they cannot report abuse without risking everything. They receive no benefits from the states. They receive no benefit from the provinces. They receive no benefit from the federal government, yet they are taxed indirectly through consumption and, when they do use false documentation, even through payroll deductions. They're treated as expendable, kept just above starvation, but well below security. And just like in the antebellum South, the system functions to extract value while giving back only what is necessary to keep the labor force alive and usable. Where the left and the right quietly agree is pretty scary. It's a broken system that hurts everyone. Despite the noise in the political arena, there's a surprising area of overlap between honest voices on the left and principled conservatives on the right. Both camps, when not beholden to the machinery of their respective parties, can see the same broken system and call it what it is: exploitation. Labor unions, traditionally aligned with the political left, have long warned that unchecked immigration undercuts wages for working class citizens. The introduction of cheap, undocumented labor creates downward pressure on pay, benefits, and job availability for legal workers, especially those without college degrees. There are progressives, real progressives, not the political operatives in expensive suits, who see the suffering of undocumented immigrants and recognize it as abuse. They understand that when someone is forced to live in fear of deportation, has no voice in the legal system, and is paid below the cost of living, they are not free. They're being used. They are enslaved, in fact. Conservatives, meanwhile, sound the alarm for different but compatible reasons. We believe in law and order. We believe in national sovereignty. But more than that, we believe that a person should be rewarded for the honest labor that they partake in, not taken advantage of because they lack the requisite paperwork. Both liberals and conservatives, if they are honest, see that the modern structure invites abuse, and both, in moments of clarity, have condemned it. The tragedy is that the voices of reason are too often drowned out by those who gain power, profit, or prestige by keeping the system broken. The moral law of God is a universal standard across borders, and this is to what Christians must appeal. The law of God is not confined to a church building or a national constitution, or a charter of rights, I guess I should say. It is the rule of right that governs all mankind, all places, at all times. The Apostle Paul declared in Romans 2:14 through 15 that even the Gentiles, who had not received the law as the Jews had, do by nature the things contained in the law, showing the work of the law written in their hearts. From the beginning, Scripture presents man as made in the image of God, Genesis 1:27. That is true of the farmer in Iowa, the migrant in Texas, the refugee in Ontario, and the child in Honduras. Whenever or wherever a person is born, whatever language they speak, they bear the image of their Creator. God's law condemns the exploitation of the vulnerable. Leviticus 19:13 commands, "Thou shalt not defraud thy neighbor, neither rob him. The wages of him that is hired shall not abide with thee all night until the morning." Deuteronomy 24:14 through 15 extends this command to the stranger. James 5:4 warns the wealthy that the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth. Now, if God judged nations for oppression, what should we expect if God judged nations for oppression, what should we expect when millions are allowed to be used and discarded under the cover of law? The functional equivalence of slavery without chains, exploitation without ownership. You see, the modern system cannot call itself slavery. But if one steps back and examines the economic function of the system, what it does and how it operates, the resemblance becomes harder to deny. I say the resemblance becomes impossible to deny. The undocumented worker is not owned by a master, but his movement is restricted by fear. He is not bound with chains, but he cannot freely walk away. He has no voice, no leverage, no defense. He is sustained just enough to work and discarded when his utility ends. There may be no auction blocks, but the core logic of slavery remains. Extract labor at minimal cost, avoid legal accountability, and maintain control through dependence and fear. This is not freedom. This is lawless. This is not lawfulness. This is not freedom. This is not lawfulness. This is, in fact, functional slavery. Before we examine the free market system more closely, we need to make one thing clear, though. What we are criticizing is not liberty or commerce, but lawlessness and the systems that allow exploitation under the guise of opportunity. The problem is not with capitalism itself, but with those who twist its mechanisms and sidestep justice. So why is this not simply an indictment of capitalism? Well, this is not an argument against capitalism. Capitalism, rightly understood, depends on individual liberty, legal recourse, and equal standing before the law. The citizen in a free market can advocate for himself. He can negotiate. He can walk away. He has access to courts, to representatives, to protections of a just society, and to the protections that a just society provides for its citizens. The undocumented immigrant has no such shield, my brethren. He is in the economy, but not in the polity. He is affected by the system, but excluded from its protections. The same profit-driven machine that rewards a citizen for productivity. So the same profit-driven machine that rewards a citizen for productivity reduces the undocumented laborer to a disposable tool, stripped of rights, protection, and dignity. This is not capitalism. It is corruption. So the Christian response is simple: justice, mercy, and the call to speak. Micah chapter 6, verse 8 makes it plain. What doth the Lord require of thee? He hath showed thee, O man, and what doth the Lord require of thee? To do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God. Jesus commands us to love our neighbor. James warned against withholding wages from the laborer. Scripture is not neutral on this issue. Christians must speak, not with slogans, but with moral clarity. We must demand reform of a system that enables abuse. We must protect the vulnerable, speak for the voiceless, uphold the dignity of work. We must do all of this not because we're political advocates. We must do all this not because we are political activists, but because we are disciples of the one true King. We need to reclaim moral clarity in an age of compromise. The immigration system in the United States and Canada, as it's currently constructed, mirror the utilitarian cruelty of the slave trade. Not in legal form, but in functional outcome. The undocumented are used, sustained, and discarded. As Christians, we cannot remain silent. We serve a God who hears the cry of the oppressed. We believe in a kingdom where every soul has value. We answer to a judge who is not impressed with rhetoric or policy, but with righteousness. And if what we are doing is not right, then it must be changed. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult, in fact, but it has no choice to change. And as Christians, we must work hard to change it. So then when I look out here and I see all the things coming from my brethren about the deportations and this, that, and the other, my response is, well, what do you expect to be done? If there are people that have broken the laws of a sovereign nation, they've got to be gone because it's the right thing to do for everybody. Because that protects both the person that is in here illegally. It protects them from being exploited by a capitalistic system. And it also protects and is just for the people who should be participating in that system normally, I guess I should say. So don't let the liberal left fearmonger and manipulate you into feeling of some kind of way. Whenever you see all of these videos of these deportations and stuff, it doesn't matter if they're gang members. It doesn't matter if they're murderers. They're here illegally, so they have to go, period. That's all it is. Anyway, well, folks, that's really all I've got this morning. I'm so thankful for the tune-ins. I'm so thankful. Thank you very much, Gold Trap, Mike Osnes. Thank you so much for liking and sharing. Remember, on Rumble, we need 100 subscribers on Rumble, 100 followers, subscribers, whatever you call them on Rumble. And it'll be good over there. We are streaming on Rumble. Let me make sure. Yes, we are streaming. Yep, we're streaming on Rumble. Thank you so much. And I'm pretty stoked with the amount of stuff we get on Rumble after the fact. So that's pretty cool. But anyway, well, folks, that's all I've got here. Remember, modern immigration, the way it's set up is basically it functions the same as antebellum slavery. And the only arguments that can be used to let the system continue as it is, those arguments all work for the chattel slave trade. Think about that. And let's be better. Mike Osnes, thank you so much. Slavery exists as long as there are people who want to be slaves. Oh, well, that's a rough one, but I think that's true. All right. God bless everyone. This has been Tony Brewer with Cogitations. Like, subscribe, and share. Rumble, Substack. Support us monetarily. God bless you, and we'll catch you.